Hello, Saints. Thanks for joining me today. I'm still away on holidays, so I've recorded this message. First of all, I invite you to come back next week. Tyler will be speaking. Tyler always does an amazing job. And I want to talk today about an account. Before we had the Sunday at Christian Victory Church, I did David and Goliath. And we'll do David for a couple more weeks. There's going to be the theme of my message, and then Tyler's going to speak, and then we're going to get into Jesus and from the Gospel of John. That's going to be amazing as we continue our Crushing It series. But today I want to talk about something that maybe is close to our hearts, just because this is current, and it's a great test for us. For when things go wrong. Now, the reason it's close to our hearts, I guess a nearest example I could do is last year, one of our members of our congregation got struck by lightning, and hopefully, I don't think directly, but just through the ground and things, and got quite a shock. And the next Sunday at our church, John was leading a song. And one of the lines of the song was, "Who tells every lightning bolt where it should go?" And when he sang that line, we were all kind of looking over this individual who was looking a little perplexed. Sometimes there's some irony in things. Today I'm going to be talking about hostage crisis. I'm going to be talking about people that abduct other people to use for their own ends, and if you've been following, which I think most of you have, the situation in Israel and the hostages taken on the horrible day of October 7th, the day of evil, this is something that is not new to the Israelites. And so our prayers and our thoughts need to go with them to any remaining hostages, that they'll be rescued, and that the men who are responsible for that horrible day will all receive justice. So when I'm talking about this today, I just know my heart's kind of touched by this story, just because this is all too familiar for people around the world. And I'm going to talk about David and the Amalekites, and the time where his home was raided in Ziklag. So join me in this, and let me open in prayer. Father, speak to our hearts today. Help us to put our trust in you even in the darkest times. And God, make us people of rescue, and people that honor you and have compassion, and people who stand on the right side of God's righteousness. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, how are we going to crush it today? First of all, we're going to talk about the bad news, what happened to David. We're going to talk about where we go for help when that happens. We're going to talk about the pursuit and the pain, some of the regrets, some people couldn't keep up, and then the reward and recognition. And so, thank you for joining us today while we do this. We're going to be reading from 1 Samuel 30, and I'll walk you through that passage, and we'll look at it as we go. First of all, it says in verse 1, David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag, and they had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the women and everyone else in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. If you look at the map, and you can see Ziklag's on the bottom right corner, and this is where David had lived for a while. Now, David had been off traveling. One thing you need to know about David, though, is in chapter 27, David himself actually raided the Amalekites regularly. And so this was kind of a common practice in those days. When he did it more as a military thing. But the Amalekites, the reason David would attack them was they were notorious in that area for stealing and for raiding people and bullying others, and just basically wreaking havoc in the countryside. They were the people that in your darkest nightmares would show up at your door. And so a number of times David took them out to protect the region and to protect Judah from the south flank. And so David had at that time been living in Ziklag, but he'd traveled with a Philistine king named Achish, I think. And the two of them actually had struck up a friendship. The irony of this is not lost on me. Gath was where Goliath came from. And David would have a long-term relationship with the people of Gath, beginning negatively and actually ending positively. He would have quite a number of their troops in his army when he became king, but that's for another story. But these people had raided Ziklag, they'd burned it, and they kept everybody captive. Probably David had left Ziklag with perhaps a bit of a rear guard, or hoping that the local Philistine leaders would keep a watch over it. But this didn't happen. And so everyone, his wives, his children, his men's wives, his men's children, any servants they had, or anybody would have been led away. And that brings us to our first crush. The first thing we should know is that our hearts are crushed. Nobody would ever want this to happen to anybody you loved. And I pray that you're never in a situation where this happens. I can't think of a worse crime than to take the innocent in order to punish the strong, and to use them to your own ends. It's just as evil today as it was then. And we've seen these last few months that happen to God's people, the people of Israel, who we are related to through Christ. And this happens all too often. So, reading on, verse 3, David and his men reached Ziklag. They found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and their sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and his daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Second crush. Before you win over others, bring God on board. David had been traveling at that point. He actually traveled with the Philistine army. They were going up against Israel. And he was in the rear with the king, the Philistine king. And I don't know what his plan was there. I would imagine if they engaged in Israelites, he would have joined the Israelites in attacking them from the rear, the Philistines. But we never know, because the Philistine commanders are not comfortable with him being there, him being Jewish, and so they send him on his way. So they had gone on this long journey north, and now they came back south, and what do they find? They found their homes had been raided, and the men are angry. Angry as anyone would be at having a loved one abducted and taken from them. David's in a precarious position because he's responsible for them, and he's also responsible for leading them. And basically, up to this point, it looked at all factors like David had led them on a wild goose chase, and they were not happy, and they were angry, and they were talking of stoning him. Not a great way to die. But before David, instead of taking his charisma or his character out in front of the men, he knows whose help he has to get. He brings God on board. He found strength in the Lord his God, because he's going to need that strength. He's going to need that strength if he's going to right the situation, and he's going to need the strength if he's going to continue to lead his men. Verse 7, Then David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, Bring me the ephod. And Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. So David and the 600 men with him came to the Besar Valley, where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued their pursuit. Now, we can't look too harshly on these 200. They had been traveling for weeks, nonstop, probably at a great pace. And when you being physically fatigued, plus this, the sense of losing your loved ones, it can be overwhelming. And for a third of his army, 200 of them, they weren't able to go on anymore. And so the 400 went on and they left them there. A lot with their equipment and things that they left behind. Third crush, third principle, your spirit cannot outrun your body. We have to take care of ourselves as well as before we can take care of other things. And David's very gracious to these men. He doesn't pursue them or push them. He doesn't threaten them. He allows them what they need, which is that point. They just can't go on. And it's a good leader that recognizes this. He recognizes that these men someday will serve him, and they'll be all the gladder if he can bring about with them an understanding and grace during this time when they're really vulnerable. Verse 11, they found the Egyptian in a field and they brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat, part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David asked him, "Who do you belong to? Where do you come from?" He said, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites and some territory belonging to Judah and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag." Fourth crush, compassion precedes victory. Don't get so caught up in your feelings when you're going through hurt that you forget to be good and kind and gracious. Parents understand this probably better than anyone. As a parent, sometimes you're just stretched. You have a lot of things that are stressing you out all at the same time. It really is a mercy. There's a verse in Isaiah that says, "The Lord leads gently those who have young." And I really believe that because often when people have their kids and their kids are young and they're full of energy, they just require 24/7 supervision. There's a lot of care that goes into taking care of kids and a lot of structure. Children are complicated and they're human beings and they have the sinful nature and they also have the touch of God on their lives. And that's enormous lot of work. But at the same time, the pressure on you to build a career and to work on your marriage and to be a part of your church, it's just all overwhelming. And God is very compassionate during those times. And compassion precedes victory. A lot of the things I can do today is because God in His grace helped me when I was inexperienced, young, poor, and maybe didn't know what I was doing. So He was compassionate to us. And David, as he comes along, finds a slave who's near death's door, and he uses compassion, and in it gains an ally. And if you're going to win in life, sometimes you're going to see or encounter people who are on their last leg. Be kind to them. Restore them. Look for ways to help them. Because on your way to victory, that may actually end up being the key to what you need to succeed in life. Verse 15, David asked him, "Can you lead me down to this raiding party?" He answered, "Swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I'll take you down to them." Interesting, he doesn't want David to kill him, but he also doesn't want to go back to the master, the person who had owned him before. Whether it's resentment at leaving him to die or whether he was just not a great master, we never know. But interesting, he asked David to do that. He led David down, and there they were, scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until evening of the next day, and none of them got away, except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder." This is a mixed bag. It's wonderful because God catches up and makes the bad guys pay. It's concerning because I can only imagine what those poor people went through, or those 3 or 4 days or longer when the Amalekites had them under their control. Reveling is a word that kind of sends a chill up our spine at what these poor people had to go through. But David recovers them all. And this was kind of a reality in those days. There was just a world of violence, and often you went through an enormous amount. Normal was very rare, and so these people are rescued by David, and the fact that he rescues them is a good thing. But like I said, this would have been a mixed bag for what these poor people had gone through. The fifth crush: everything committed to God will be returned. Here's a principle that maybe perhaps redeems this: is in life we often do without, or in life we often pay forward. There's always a sense in this world, you always want to get all you can and enjoy all you can. But the principle of God teaches us that we do enjoy the things that God brings us and the way he rewards us. But the greatest reward will be what we have ahead of us in heaven when we live with God. And I have this theory, and maybe I'm wrong. You're welcome to theologically look it up. But I have a sense that everything we commit to God in this world, or we give to him, will be returned better in the next world. I've seen people lose a child. It's a horrible thing to go through. And well, there may be a lot of questions about the suffering those people go through, or what God played, what role he played in that. I believe he's the same God who's going to return those children to them. I believe that things that I would have liked to have done, just because I enjoyed them, at times have had to lay those aside. I believe that God, I've entrusted them to him, that someday maybe I will get to enjoy those things. Not in this world, maybe the next. Time to do things, studies I'd like to take, things I'd like to learn, people I'd like to meet. I would love in heaven to meet C.S. Lewis. I just would. I would really love to spend some time with him. And I'm entrusting that to God. So everything committed to God will be returned, whether in this life or the life to come. Going on, 21, and then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him, and who were left behind at the Besor valley. They came out to meet David and the men with him. As David and his men approached, he asked them how they were. But all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers said, "Because they did not go out with us, they will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go." David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do that. With what the Lord has given us, he has protected us and delivered us into our hands the raiding party that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as him who went down to the battle. All will share alike." And David made this a statute, an ordinance for Israel from that day to this. People looked at that situation and they saw it as a reason for division. The resentment of those individuals still stayed with some of them, and they wanted to punish those who could not come with them. David demonstrates incredible genius and grace here, because the troublemakers, they said, well, just give them their wives and children and then send them off to live on their own. That's not how you keep a community together. David recognized that these men were at the end of themselves, and he showed them grace. And he shows them grace again by sharing the plunder. And I guess I have to ask a question, down the road with those men, those 200 men who had been treated with grace and respect when they were too weak to go on, what kind of loyalty would they have shown David later on? I'm going to hazard to guess, but I don't think I'm far off. Probably they were the most loyal people he had from that day forward. Why? Because he recognized that they had a role to play, and also recognized what they could and what they couldn't do. That's just great leadership. Verse 26, and David reached Ziklag. He sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah who were his friends and said, here's a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. David sent it to those who were in Bethel, Ramoth Negev, and Jatir, and to those in Aror. I'm going to mess up some of these names. Sipmoth, Eth Timoah, Rakel, and those in the towns of the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites, and to those in Horamah, Borashan, Athak, and Hebron, and those in all the other places where he and his men had roamed. Seventh crush, use treasure to build relationships. There's a quote by Simon Weil says, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. He didn't need to do this, but he recognized that probably in those regions, some of those people had been raided by these same Amalekites and shared the risk of what they would do each and every day. So what's he do? David throws a party, and he shares the goodness of what God has accomplished with him, and shares it with the people in the region. Again, smart leadership, really smart leadership. That's a great way to demonstrate to others your consideration of them. You know, I think of his generosity during this time, and it wasn't just advantageous, it was smart. It was smart, and it was gracious, and it was amazing. So that's really all I got to say about this passage. There's just so much in here. It's a good passage for a couple of reasons. Life often has its horrible defeats, and then it has opportunities where we can be bitter or better, whether we can entrust ourselves to God, even when we don't understand, or where we can turn our anger to the sky, to those around us, and live a life of resentment. David demonstrates the first. He takes trust and he leans into God when he's in his darkest hour. And then also when things are going his way, when he's starting to win, he's gracious. He's taking care of other people. He's seen those who might have been taken advantage of or overlooked or resented. And he keeps everyone together. He truly demonstrates good shepherding here. And he's an inspiration for leaders everywhere, but he's inspirations to you and I. Bad things are going to happen. What kind of people are we going to be? Let's be like David. Let's look at the character of what he accomplished. And as we look at our world, we're going to encounter many people who are hostages of the enemy, taken unawares. And they're going to need us to rescue them, just the way we've been rescued. And for some of us, we're going to lead the charge. For others, are going to watch the baggage. And whatever role God plays or has you play in this great rescue, which is the Church of Jesus Christ, never, ever forget, you matter. You matter. And let us not forget, we are not here for ourselves, but we are here to rescue people from the hands of the enemy. Hostage rescue. That's probably a good definition of what the church is. The hospital of the soul. The place where we gather together and we experience God's presence and healing. And where we pursue, where we always have seats for more. We are always looking outward at the lost hostages of this world. And that's all I got to say about that. So let me pray, and then I'll let you get back to the service. Father, thank you. You've been kind to us. You've rescued us. Help us be rescuers ourselves. Help us not to bend to the resentment and anger that this world would have us adapt to, and instead, God, to embrace you in our darkest hour, not to look to people, but to look to God. And then to hear and get the direction from you. Not to resent you for what evil happens in this world, but instead become rescuers. God, help us to rescue the lost. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you, saints. Thank you.